Welcome back. So let's get to that very first conversation that has to do with Nigeria's economic outlook. And of course, we can't talk about outlook of the economy of Nigeria without looking at what's playing out around the world and how it can trickle it down to our local economy. We've been joined in the program by the Chief Executive Officer of Cowrie Asset Management Limited, Mr. Johnson Chukwu, who joins us virtually from Owerri. I'll be joining us pretty soon, Dr. Olugbenga Adeoye, Chartered Accountant, and also to be joining us soon is Professor Shehu Mohammed Tijani, Head of Department of Economics, Bayero University in Kano State. Mr. Chukwu, it's good to see you. Thank you for coming on the program.
I hope you guys know channels is muted. I can't hear them.
Can you hear me now, Mr. Chukwu? Oh, dear. So we'll just try to sort that out as quickly as possible. Okay, Mr. Chukwu, I understand you can hear us now.
Yes, I can hear you now. Initially, it was muted. I couldn't hear you earlier.
All right,
Good morning, Geoffrey.
Fantastic. Thank God the recession hasn't hit our technology yet. So
They're muted again. I think they muted you again. I can't hear you again.
Oh, dear, Mr. Chukwu, don't worry. We're going to sort this out as soon as in just a jiffy, so we can have a productive conversation. So let me try again. Can you hear me better now?
I can hear you now.
Fantastic. So at any point you're not hearing me, just guess what I asked and you can respond. You already know what's going on in the world. Anyway, that's an aside. I would like your intervention quickly on what is playing out between the U.S. and the rest of the world. What I consider aggressive protectionism, and in those kind of scenarios, it appears nobody really wins because it's antithetical to resource interdependence as nature has distributed it. But everybody is trying to make headway as far as their understanding of their own local economy is concerned. So a few things have happened in the last few days. We've seen the market really hit badly, and then we'll see that dead cat bounce, and then a bit of a rally afterwards, and then we're a bit of stability. But there's a fear there's a recession in the face of all of this. But maybe your general assessment of the approach of these global powers. Now, China has responded to the U.S. with 125, just like U.S. has given them 125 in terms of the imports into their various countries. And it looks like everybody's ready for that tit for tat. Nobody wants to come to the negotiation table. Before we come to smaller guys like us as African continent, how will this impact all of us? And what do you interpret to be what is playing out here?
Thank you, Geoffrey, once again for having me. The implications of the trade war that U.S. triggered, because we have to really put the blame where it actually belongs. The U.S. triggered it, and it's unnecessary we emphasize it, that it beggars logic that one nation, irrespective of how powerful you are, will start a trade war with every nation of the world. And what we're seeing today is a response of China, and I feel it's appropriate that somebody stand up to a bully, and I'm happy China is doing that. Of course, China has also said that after increasing its tariff on U.S. import to 125%, it will not respond further. It will just ignore U.S. President further actions. But most importantly, this has distorted global markets. Crude prices, commodity prices, inflation rate, virtually every component of the macroeconomic variable has been distorted. If you take, for instance, crude prices, prior to this Donald Trump's trade war, what they call the Freedom Day, crude was trading in the region of $73 to $77 per barrel. Today, as at close of trade yesterday, it was about $63 per barrel. We saw ICE, that is the price of fuel, diesel and fuel, in the region of $618 per metric ton. It had dropped to the region of $580, $560 to dollar per metric ton. We've seen gold prices improve or increase significantly in the past 2 weeks. And we've seen concerns about inflation rates. We've seen stock market prices globally turn red. And these are the causes or the effects of those trade wars that are triggered. Unfortunately, I think the right thing is to say, fortunately, he has suspended it for 90 days. He has paused it for 90 days. Well, that has sent a very negative signal to the world, even as he has suspended it. What that means is that the countries like the European Union can no longer count on the relationship they have with the US. that they will be pre-informed, that they will negotiate before any sanction is imposed on them. A country like Japan, South Korea, these are traditional allies of the US. We are all hit without any form of negotiation. The president was now asking them subsequently to come and negotiate. So he has also reset the social and political nature of relationship between the world countries. And he has basically destroyed the WTO, that's World Trade Organization. So the impact of this at the macro level is huge, but bringing it down home, of course, we saw, like I mentioned earlier, crude prices have dropped, which means our foreign exchange earnings will be in jeopardy or will be threatened. That sort of means that we will see possibly a depreciation of local currency, which has actually happened since the announcement was made. We saw Naira depreciate from the region of 1,540 Naira to the region of 1,640 Naira, over 100 Naira depreciation in a period of 2 weeks. And then we also seen the central bank become more bullish in treasury-based offers to help stabilize the exchange rate. These are the momentary impacts, but they will be longer-term difficult issues to deal with.
All right, Mr. Chuku, let's bring in Professor Shehu Mohammed Tijani is the head of Department of Economics, Bayero University, joining us from Kano. Prof, good morning and welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, Mr. Geoffrey.
All right, Prof, Mr. Chuku has given his own intervention as so he was quite frontal at it, that perhaps, maybe not using his own words, using my word, the bit of impulsive or recklessness of the Trump administration to some of these wars that he started. He's putting it squarely on Trump to distort that level of trade order in that sense. We know that the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy had laid fears that, look, there's nothing much really to worry about. But when we look at the numbers, we're already in $10 deficit of our projection, where we projected $75. Right now, Brent is doing at 64, almost 65. So that is affecting our revenue point. I know that we've not diversified our economy in terms of how we earn Forex. Within the economy, we have diversification, but how we earn Forex, it still accounts for over 80%. So that is going to affect us. And I understand he's also putting together a team that will have a coordinated response. But in your view, how far-reaching can this be, and what should we be preparing for? If you were to sit in the room with Mr. Wale Edun, what would you be telling him?
Well, in the first instance, we know that we are running an oil-dependent economy, and over several decades, things have not changed much. We have been carrying out reforms over 30 years, close to 40 years, really. And it seems as if these reforms are, will keep on being there forever. So it is as if this is the first time we are experiencing this kind of situation caused by global crisis or something which, of course, the president of the United States is bringing about. We don't tend to prepare for the future, and mainly we focus on short term rather than on what will happen in the long term. So if Trump, is keeping his promises to the to the U.S. citizens, everybody already knows that he's going to do that. And if a country is not prepared, it's not taking Trump seriously, then it means that country simply is living in the past, because Trump, right from his first time, has shown, where he is heading to, and he has promised to do that, and he's doing what he has promised the people to. What he has promised the people. So, in our own case, we know that up till now we refused, or rather could not, or whatever may be the reason, to diversify the economy away from oil. So every time we are forced to focus on short term rather than looking at the long term, because economic crisis or turmoil or all these problems coming globally will already affect us, because we simply refuse, or rather not, or whatever may be the case, to diversify the economy away from oil. And what is worse is, even as at now, we only concentrate on the symptoms or the outcomes of the entire process, rather than looking into the process itself. So if you have to have a conversation about these issues, It's not going to be just talking about how the macroeconomy will have effect on it. This is a well-known something to many, experts and analysts about the effect of, devaluation, interest rate hike and all that stuff. But what about the fundamental? The fundamental economy, the real economy itself. And the conversation is not going there. We are not productive. We are supposed to begin a process in which we turn this economy into a productive one. And unless we do that, nothing really is going to change. Because when you look at the projections, talking about maybe the economy will grow by 3.2%, some will say 3.5%, central bank will say it's 4.17%, and so on and so forth. But the question really is, the focus is always on macroeconomic variables, not on the real economy, the productive sector of the economy. And this is where we always get it wrong. And so long as we refuse to do something about that, we'll continue to dance to the tune of worldwide economic fluctuations.
And that is the real concern. At this point, it's tried to expand the conversation, and we have Dr. Olubenga Adeoye joining us also, who is a chartered accountant. And it's expected that the focus is on crude oil, which is our main trading product with the United States and indeed with other partners in the world. But the tariffs, affect now our non-oil exports. And I'm just going to quote what the Minister of Finance has said in reaction to this. He said for Nigeria, in terms of exports, it's not too bad because oil minerals are excluded by America from being in any way sanctioned with tariffs. But based on our non-oil exports and based on the formula that the Americans are using, we do have a 14% tariff on our exports, but it's a lot better than Vietnam, which has 46%. And I'm always want to look at, the products that fall under this non-oil exports category and the value. There's flour, 28.21 billion, according to U.S. trading website. There's urea, 20.33 billion. Just to mention two out of the products. This may not be in the same value of, the forex that we get from our crude oil dealings with our partners. But there seems to be some potential here. So, Dr. Adeoye, I want you to speak on this reaction from, the Minister of Finance, which we will adopt as the official reaction from the government. Does it speak of value, premium placed on our non-oil exports and an action plan that really should be put out in reaction to this 14% tariff, if indeed we place value on the age-long conversation on diversification of the economy?
Okay. One of the major challenges that you find around every country is external shocks and global volatility. And if you don't prepare for these external shocks, you'll find yourself on the floor. It's important for us to look at the enemies of the United States at the moment, because what you see in tariff in the US now is what I call terrorism through tariffs. And it's against international trade, it's against World Trade Organization principle. One of the key issues that we need to look at is the most favored nation principle of tariffs. You are not supposed to have, various rates of tariffs for different countries. It does not encourage globalization of business relationship. And so what Nigeria needs to do is not to solely focus on the 14% on our crude exports to the US. We must bear in mind that what powers like China that we depend on largely have majority of their exports going to the US. And so with this terrorism between them, the China economy will not have to consider either to increase prices of certain goods that goes to Africa. And so we then have to come up with a strategy to look at our mining sector and ensure that we start from raw material to finished goods. minimize export of solid mineral out of the country so that we can stabilize. Of course, we also need to look at our budget. What is the benchmark of crude rate, since we depend largely on oil? So it's not to focus only on oil. The reaction of the Minister of Finance to an extent may be valid, but not in totality, because there are other economic variables that we need to consider.
So, Dr. Chukwu, I'm bringing the same question to you. How much value does the Minister of Finance's reaction place on our non-oil exports? And does it speak of a comprehensive plan, to produce shock absorbers for the exporters in that space in order to manage those tariffs, if indeed they come through in 3 months' time after, this suspension?
What the ministers, the truism as it relates to the current trade relationship between Nigeria and the U.S. But then we could expand that fact of life to take advantage of what is going on today. In terms of the impact, direct impact of the U.S. Tariff on Nigeria's export is relatively minimal, because what we export are largely energy products, and the U.S. exempted energy products from the tariffs. In terms of our non-oil-related exports, they are very inconsequential, and they are largely consumptions by Nigerians. We have not developed the benefication, the value addition in other products that we will be able to compete favorably with in the U.S. market. We are not doing that. And that's why I say we now need to expand the conversation to ask ourselves, what do we need to do to be able to export more products, more value-added products to the U.S.? We made reference to the tariff on Vietnam. And Vietnam's tariff is about 46-47% tariff, because the Vietnam today has become a major export base, a major manufacturing base for products going to US. 10, 20 years ago, it was far from that. They were obviously in a worse situation than us, but they have been able to improve their infrastructure supply, improve competencies, that today, if you wear a Nike cloth, gym wears, Nike shoes, several of the things that are being consumed in the US, they are produced in Vietnam by the US companies. And that's where Nigeria should be looking at. So how do we take advantage of the fact that the duty imposed on Nigeria is only 14%, to ensure that we encourage companies that are producing in countries with heavy tariff to move to Nigeria? And that's what India is doing. India's tariff is about 27%, and India is already trying to lure companies that are into light manufacturing in Vietnam to move to India, because for them, they can export to US at a lower tariff. Unfortunately, we should actually be in a better position, in a vaulting position than India, given our tariff, the tariff imposed on us, because ultimately, we should expect that these tariffs may eventually come into effect. And even if they don't come into effect, they have reshaped the global thinking of business leaders and say, where do I have to produce if I have to target the US market? Because the US market will take them a long time to be cost competitive. And as long as they don't become cost competitive, the onshoring effort of Donald Trump will be difficult to achieve.
All right, let's take it to Prof. I'm kind of very excited the direction of this conversation, because now we're trickling down. So, Prof, it appears the consensus among all of you gentlemen is to the effect that because of what we export to the U.S., we may be able to escape a few things. But the bigger impact is because of effects from sales of crude oil, which is our biggest cash cow at the end of the day. But Mr. Chukwu has raised an important point, which I want you to piggyback on, in terms of how we can now make ourselves as a country a destination of choice in the future, whether there is this kind of distortion or not. The Vietnam example is there. We can go to other countries that are now destination of choice. When you hear these names, initially you would think about war first, and then you now realize how much of an economic powerhouse they've become in a very short time. You wonder, what did they do right? So let's begin with some of the legacy issues that you think Nigeria has to address. We're still struggling with power, road infrastructure, and all of this. What action plan should we be dealing with now, and what can we achieve in, say, the fiscal year 2025 based on our budget to give investors that sentiment to say, okay, Nigeria may be another destination we should look at. We have all kinds of free trade zone, but how much of that is going on right now? Prof.
Yeah, thank you very much. If you look at, the position of the budget as far as the 2025 budget is concerned, I think one area in which it is focusing on is on energy. And if, of course, that area is tackled the way it's supposed to be, perhaps that will give some relief to those who want to establish industries or existing industries to be more competitive. Now, if we as a country continue to employ 19th century solutions to 21st century problems, we will not get anywhere. We've seen countries that have done very well by, as you have rightly pointed out, positioning themselves in the world. Take the case of United Arab Emirates. This country, they started way back 1973. By that time, we were awash in petrodollars. Yet, that country did not take that route. They look at themselves and look at the future and think that the best way to do this is to position the country and bring the world to their own country. And that is exactly what they are able to do. And unless we start putting in place those things that will make the world to come to us, it's not a matter of just tariffs on mainly the goods that we export, which are largely raw materials, even the so-called non-oil exports. We export maybe, mineral resources, agricultural products with very little value added. That is not what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to start thinking seriously how to overhaul the entire industrial system to make sure the fact that we become more productive. And I'm happy that of course, it was painful removing the subsidy because it led to a lot of issues. But then at least that will reduce our proclivity for imports. And in that sense, we might be compelled to start producing some of those things we're importing. So that is something which is, of course, in a good direction. But we must know that placing ourselves to become global players, we need to bring the world here. And to bring the world here means we have to fundamentally change from law to politics to economy to everything that we do, to education, everything. And unless we try to do that, nothing fundamentally is going to change. Every year we'll simply be talking about this budget, this growth, that growth, and nothing fundamentally is going to change. So we have countries we can learn from, and they are there. We say that, these are case examples we can draw something from if truly we are serious about doing anything. But as far as I'm concerned, I do not see anything in the horizon that shows the fact that we are fundamentally ready to make that change.
All right. I'm going to come to Dr. Adeoye now. Mr. Chukwu had made a very valid point that we do not have competitive advantage as far as our non-oil exports are concerned. But with the value of what we're able to do in that space, Dr. Adeoye, what do you believe the impact of the 14% tariff would be on, Nigeria's export, particularly when you consider what seems to be the policy flip-flop as far as clearance of cargo is concerned, 15% port charges? What will be the impact for exporters?
Well, because the oil sector, exporting oil is the major export that we have. Remember, I mentioned the need for us to take all our raw material that we're exporting to finished goods. And so with what Dangote is doing, I'm looking at a country that we will not be rejoicing because we just have 14% of tariffs from the US on oil export. Our focus should be on how do we ensure that there is no importation of finished petroleum products into Nigeria. So that's one. Because countries are built on comparative advantage. So you look at what you have raw material for, and that, I think, right now, with what is happening globally, we must take one step. Number one is that we should not inherit the enemies of any country. You don't say because the US has imposed tariffs on China, on Vietnam, or any country, and then they become your enemy. So what you bring out is the olive branch and say, look, come to my country, I have good relationship with the US, you can produce here, and then we export. For me, focusing on 14% tariffs on crude oil export out of the country is not a thing to rejoice about, because I still feel that exporting crude oil is like exporting your citrus from your farm and then buying fruit juice, orange juice from those countries.
Let's bring it to Mr. Chukwu. Mr. Chukwu, I want us to unpack a few things domestically. We'll go back to the global scene in just a moment, but let's unpack a few things from what we can do. I think we can agree that within the GDP, within our local economy, we have all kinds of sectors with the leads like agriculture, especially crop production. We have trade coming in second. We have telecommunication and all of that coming in third. These are the big double digits we've recorded, although when we look at the year-on-year growth of those sectors, they are marginal. The maximum is maybe less than 1.5, let's just say less than 2%. What I'm saying is that one of our biggest, lowest hanging fruit will be policy direction and regulation. I want you to speak to the issue of the tax reform and how this can help reposition the economy for good, if that is what you see. Because the reason why I'm taking this conversation in this direction is that Trump has made us to now realize that we need to do a lot of housekeeping. That is what China did for many years. Why America was fighting Russia and fighting everybody, flexing muscle, they were just quiet. And that's one of the things frustrating America, their conservative nature. You don't know when they are coming, where they are coming. People are saying China is 50 years ahead of the rest of the world. Business corporates in America are even telling Trump to go as far as 200% because they can't even litigate in places like China. So that gives us an opportunity to, while they are fighting their big fights, what can we do here? So let's begin what we started already, fiscal policy. What can be done to expedite action and make us do better?
Okay, Geoffrey, your question started with on the tax reform. And what I'll say is that the tax reform, if you look at the tax reform, there are a lot of positive we can take away from tax reform. One of which is that it has reduced to the barest minimum taxes imposed on small and medium-scale enterprises, so as to allow them to breathe and develop and have the competencies or the resources to pay taxes. That's a very good plus. The other things are to harmonize the number of taxes and make the tax system very predictable, so that you know which taxes you're going to pay, not that people will just jump on you and while you're on the road and say, bring this tax, where your radio tax, where is this? So that created a lot of uncertainty around the tax system. So these two factors alone will ordinarily help us improve our business environment. One, in terms of the number of taxes, the certainty of the taxes, the smoothness or the ease, harmonization of the payment process. Hopefully, we believe once this is fully implemented, it will make it easy for businesses operating in the country to effectively know their tax liabilities, compute their tax liabilities, and properly prepare to pay their taxes. And then for the small and medium scale enterprises who the new tax it's not yet a law, will reduce their tax burden. We hope that that will allow us to stimulate the growth of the most productive and the most pervasive segment of the economy, like you mentioned, China. If you look at China's growth was largely driven by small and medium-scale enterprises that have now become corporates or corporations. We need to do that. We need to, because that's the largest employer of labor. That's the largest productive sector we have in the economy, and that's the sector that has the strongest growth prospects. But tax is one of the major factors we need to address. There are several other factors. It is a necessary, but tax improving the tax system is a necessary but not a sufficient condition to stimulate economic growth that we need now. One of those areas I need to mention, obviously in passing because we don't have time, is issue of infrastructure. If you do not have the supporting infrastructure, you cannot be a productive economy. When you talk of supporting infrastructure, it must be available and it must be relatively cost effective. Take, for instance, power supply. Today, we do not have the power supply available, and even when it's available, it is at exorbitant cost in terms of tariff. Bear in mind that this serves as input material to whatever you're going to produce. And when your input cost is high, it then means your output cost will be high. And when your output cost is high, you cannot compete in other markets. So we need to address the issue of power supply at availability and cost. We need to address the issue of transport infrastructure supply, the logistic supply you need to move goods and raw material from one location to the other, the efficiency of our transport system, the road network, the rail network, and then we now look at other logistic supply like the seaports. The time it takes you to bring in goods from the seaport and the time it takes you to export goods from the seaport, and the cost of those exports. And then we now look at our tariff structure. We look at what do we charge for those who are exporting. There are several hidden taxes inbuilt in our corrupt-laden processes in terms of what it takes the informal taxes you pay to take your goods out of the seaport, and the informal taxes you pay to export your goods from the country. We need to address all these things. And it's only when we begin to do those things that we'll begin to prepare the economy to be an economy that is productive. And the other factors we need to look at is the quality of labor or the quality of labor we're producing from our higher institutions. It must be fit for purpose. What I mean by fit for purpose, we need to ask ourselves, how do we want to position the economy? If we want to position the economy as a manufacturing base for the world, we need to improve on technical skills. The world has gone to what they call science, engineering, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM education. It has to be brought into our curriculum to develop the labor force that we need to be a competitive economy.
And it would be a good time to tie that to the performance of the administration. It's been 23 months, and if we walk down a bit memory lane, would recall the calls for Nigerians to tighten their belts, the policies of fuel subsidy removal, floating of the naira, and most recently the naira for crude policy. So 23 months down the line, what would you say has been the gains of this policy? And does it reflect that indeed the managers of the economy have well thought out these policies? Are they working, and are they taking Nigeria to the destination of economic liberalization that we're expecting? I'm bringing that to you now, Dr. Adeoye.
So far, 23 months in government, you've not had ASU strike, so they're doing something about the university. The student loan is there. I would say that one of the things that the federal government needs to do quickly is to expand the student loan to School of Nursing at the state and federal level. Now, my colleague there mentioned about technical education. We've not paid adequate attention to technical education. Now, no matter the kind of policies you have in your country, no matter the tax system we have, the issue of reducing tax, threshold, that if your income is up to 50 million naira a year, you are exempted from all of these taxes. Well, that's not only the policy they are good, because we are also stakeholders in this policy formulation. But then security is one vital thing that the government needs to pay attention to. The other attention government needs to pay is that regulatory authorities must see themselves as employees of the citizens, employees of the taxpayer. So if I approach you at customs, at NAFDAC, at FIRS, or any other offices, you must first see me as a friend, as your employer, and then you want to provide services for me. One of the things that I find out when I visited Kenya is that every employee in their tourism business, they take you like their employer. So government need to do something about security. We need to do something about change of orientation. Our technical school need to be funded. Most of the state governments are just playing lip services. And then at state level, we need to hold our governors responsible. A situation where we share 1.something trillion every month, and then state governors collect money, and then you start seeing FX increasing in the black market. it's not a good thing. So all the blames may not go to the federal government. And then one other thing that I think we need to do now is to also do periodic review of the policies that we have on ground. Yes, it's good to remove subsidy so that you don't continue to waste money on people that are not important, but I think we also need to do something more about who are the people claiming to have imported and then they are not importing. Now, the issue of floating of our currency, the Naira, is something that I still have doubt about. You cannot just look at your currency to be rolling on the ground. And we have examples of countries that have done that. It's not yielding that it didn't yield good results for them. Germany did that. Argentina did that. All the other countries, even Russia, did that prior to around 1999. So I think we need to pay attention to the floating of our currency, our Naira. Of course, we know that the law of demand and supply is a key factor. If your balance of trade is negative, you can have problem with exchange rate. But that in itself does not mean you should just look at your currency falling off, because when you are import dependent, most of the finished goods that you are bringing to the country, they respond significantly to what happens in the foreign exchange market. So with the 100 Naira that you have now, now that dollar is exchanging for 1,600 plus, you can see that in various importation, you are buying refrigerator, fan, and all of those. So I think the government needs to do periodic review. Sit down with stakeholders, genuine businessmen, all of us coming together to say, look, what is our focus? What is affecting us? And then pay attention to security. Of course, we cannot overemphasize the need for transportation infrastructure. A situation where everybody just put their cars on the road when fuel is expensive is not good for us. The transport system in London is one of the best things that has happened to the United Kingdom. And so we need to pay attention. Kudos to the current head of the Nigerian Railway Corporation. I was at the golf course in Abeokuta, and I saw containers, being transported from Lagos to other parts of the country, and I was really happy. But you see, the infrastructure we have in rail today is just like 5% of what we actually need. And so we should not rejoice yet. We need to do more. We need to expand. And government must be deliberate in our budgeting system. A situation where you just do budgeting and you say constituency project, you just pad figure into the budget, and then a senator or whoever wakes up tomorrow and then just take that out, and you cannot see value for it. It's not good for us. So we need to be deliberate. Rail infrastructure, education, technical education, security. Yes, thank God security has improved to an extent, but we need to do more. You can't ask me to go and set up a farm in Kano, Kaduna, or any other places when I am not sure that workers are safe on the farm. And this applies to countries that are coming to bring foreign direct investment too. If there is no security, nobody is going to invest in ranching, nobody is going to invest in crop production. And so, regulatory agencies that are creating bottlenecks, we need to look at them too. And state government need to be called to order. Now with the new tax reform, we are saying all the nonsense tax, like consumption tax, we should not be talking about it. Why this bill is going on at the National Assembly, they should be working on repealing the consumption tax in their respective states, because that's why the allocation to state government has now increased to 55%, and federal government is giving away 5% from their 15%, while local governments still take their 35%. So immediately, state government need to begin to repeal consumption tax laws, so that those that are investing in hospitality industry, because tourism is a new goal for our country. Look at what happened in December in Lagos, dirty December. And so, if you are bringing consumption taxes, you're having bottlenecks, you're going to have problem with people bringing their investment.
Mr. Adeoye, you really hit it on the head as far as it trickles down to all of us, because we can throw up all of these macroeconomic numbers and look fancy and good. For instance, our GDP landed fairly okay, not as it should be anyway, because if we want to do that $1 trillion economy, we're a far cry. But we ended at 3.8. We've not seen the rebase number. We've also seen the rebase CPI. downward trajectory, 25, 22, 23%. We're seeing all of these numbers, but how it affects all of us at the end of the day is what we want to talk about. But two things I want you to do quickly. I don't know whether it's Mr. Adioye or Mr. Chukwu that has said it. I want you to talk about scalability within our curriculum in universities. That's on one hand. The other hand, I want you to do a quick projection of where you see us landing. There are projections of 4% with our GDP. Inflation, the president has given an ambitious number of 15%. So if we want to walk by the president's ambition of 15% based on the rebase, he should be telling us 5% by now if we want to do the numbers. So where do you see this economy going, and how will it affect us who are consumers? And also speak to that consumption tax element that Mr. Adioye has mentioned. I went to buy something with my wife somewhere, I'm paying VAT, I'm paying consumption tax. I don't understand. Prof, that's for you.
For me or for Prof?
It's for Prof. My apologies.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Hello?
Prof, did you get my question? All right, Mr. Chukwu, you can respond since Prof is not ready.
Hello?
Okay, let me start from the tail end of your question. I think having a consumption tax and value-added tax is double taxation. They all both refer to consumption. If we want to increase the value-added tax rate, we can increase it, but to have those two taxes for an economy that is struggling to grow will be an overkill. If you look at advanced economies, like where you have the US, where they have local government tax or municipal tax, they have city tax, they have all state tax, that's slightly different. But here, you still are dealing with households that are struggling to make ends meet. If you look at the level of household income in the country today, it's one of the lowest you have in the world. Our per capita income is less than $2,000. It certainly drops significantly below that. So we can't afford to impose taxes, because bear in mind that in economics, we say tax is a leakage. And why do we say tax is a leakage? When you take tax from consumers, you constrain them from consuming. When you constrain them from consuming, you constrain demand. When you constrain demand, you constrain production. When you constrain production, you slow down your economic growth rate. So you can only increase taxes if you have an overheated economy, and then you want to slow down consumption. But today we want to stimulate consumption. We want to stimulate economic growth. So increasing tax burden will not be, it will actually counterbalance or vitiate that objective. Then if you look at the growth of the economy, if you look at the four quarters of last year, you will actually see that there's some level of recovery in the economy. For instance, the economy grew at 2.98% in the first quarter of last year. It grew about 3.19% in the second quarter of last year, 3.46% in the fourth quarter of last year, and 3.84% in the fourth quarter of last year. So you can see some level of consistent growth trajectory. But given that our population is growing at about 2.4%, if you look at overall economic growth last year, it was 3.4%. So we actually had only a positive improvement of 1%, net positive improvement of 1%. And that is too slow to, first of all, recover the depression or the recession we've had 2 years in the past 10 years. 2 years of the past 10 years. You need to recover that. You need to also grow at a rate that will begin to create employment for those who are in the labor market, not to talk of those who are coming into the labor market. You have to look at your economy must be growing at a rate that is creating employment to meet the demands of those who are coming into the labor market afresh, and those are in arrears who have not been taken out. So we are not growing at that rate. Then if you further disaggregate the economy, you realize that the major hitters, you did mention that agriculture is the largest contributor to the economy, at 24-25% of the economy, followed by telecommunications, about 70% of the economy, followed by trade, about 50% of the economy, before you move down to the likes of manufacturing, the likes of oil and gas, the likes of financial services industry has gone to about 5%, then you go to construction industry and real estate. So if you sum up the first 4 hitters, you're about 70% of the economy. And those 3 hitters are all declining in terms of their growth rate. Agriculture grew about 1.19% for the entire year of 2024. The telecommunication grew about 5.4% in the entire year, and that has witnessed a consistent decline in the growth rate. Then same with manufacturing sector. Oil and gas was only one that showed some level of improved growth. So if you look at that, you also realize that we're not growing the sectors that will drive economic growth. We're not doing that. Other macroeconomic variables, because you're assessing the government over the past 22 months. Other macroeconomic variables, you talked about inflation. Inflation averaged 33.2% last year, 33.18% to be specific. Last year, that was too high. Yes, we are saying it's declining, but based on the higher base. Using last year's average as a base. You look at we have seen some stability in the exchange rate this year until the Trump policy. But all the same, we are seeing some level of growth, recovery. In summary, we are seeing some level of recovery in the economy.
All right, let's quickly take the same question to Prof. This time, I'm wondering if, this 3.8% growth rate of the last quarter of 2024 is a mere academic exercise. Particularly if you look at the practicality on ground in terms of price of commodities, skyrocketing price in agricultural produce, and all the other, practicalities on ground. Is it a mere academic exercise? And if not, what is the growth rate that would really translate into the gains that we desire?
Well, one thing that is very clear is that we tend to focus so much on GDP growth rate, as if this growth rate is just going to happen by itself. And so conservative figure we always project. For instance, now we are talking about 3.5, 4.7. These are all conservative. This is all conservative numbers. If truly we are serious about growing the economy, we should do what somebody, I think it was the president of United Arab Emirates said, that if you are going to do catch up, you will never catch up. But if you are running a race against someone, then you should run faster than that person. And that's the only way you will do better. If, as the last speaker has rightly pointed out, we are thinking about 3-point-something, 4-point-something growth rate, when the population growth rate is still on the high side, the only thing we'll get at the end is marginal improvement. So we need a holistic approach to this issue. The issue that liberalized economy will end up trickling down, to masses, to this and that. These are all economic doctrines which have not been borne out by the facts. Because seeing how Japan, a free market economy in which the government is seriously involved in how the economy is managed, in how companies grow, develop, and become global players. So here we touch there, and you will see the fact that up to date, we do not even have what is called a leading sector of the economy. All we have is this oil here, agriculture there, industry there, and everyone is just doing everything in different directions without looking at the problem from a holistic point of view.
All right,
if we are talking about growth, the first place to attack is agriculture. If the present administration bring this kind of economic shock, I call it, when they remove subsidy and naira, which of course was a bold step.
Prof, if I may comment,
bold step is what we need to change the narrative in the agricultural sector.
All right, Prof, I think that's, my apologies. If you can land in just 10 seconds, because of time, just 10 seconds.
Right. Okay, so if we looking at agriculture, which has been there for ages, with the same old traditional methods still being applied without any appreciable change over the years, we cannot be talking about any serious growth coming, into this economy.
Okay.
The last one we experienced, I think during the Obasanjo administration, was about 6 to 7%, was driven largely by foreign-led investments.
All right, Prof.
So,
I'm sure that's why we are having this conversation, so we can do that projection. But that's a fine place to anchor, Prof. It's an ongoing conversation. Where we just stepped 12 days into the second quarter of 2025. We've not seen the numbers for the first quarter in terms of GDP, but I must thank all of you gentlemen. Professor Shehu Mohammed Tijani, Head of Department of Economics, Bayero University, joining us from Kanu. Dr. Olugbenga Adeoye is a chartered accountant, also joining us from Abuja studios, and Mr. Johnson Chukwu, Chief Executive Officer of Carrier Asset Management Limited, joining us from Owerri, the Imo State capital. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on the program. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
thank you for having me.